Welcome everyone. This is the Tuesday class of Inner Renewal Week in the year 2021. Today we'll be focusing on different aspects of Kriya Yoga. I'm Nayaswami Pranaba, and joining me today will be Nayaswami Anandi and Nayaswami Jaya. Let's focus together and join me in this prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, Beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashai, Swami Sri Yukteswar, Beloved Guru, Paramhansa Yogananda, Saints of all religions, we humbly bow before Thee. We open ourselves to Thy divine presence. Guide us to deepen our devotion, to expand our attunement, that we may merge into Thy consciousness, into Thy bliss. Strengthen us to be instruments of Thy blessings out into this world. Om, peace. Amen. We'll now have some music playing the song, O Master.
Above the hills, above the sky. joy fill our days. O Master, may thy wisdom guide our ways. Guide all our hopes and all our dreams, past every glow that only seems, into the light, the inner sun, into the truth that we're all one. Help us to find in every hour, in every thought, in every flower, a joy that spans eternity, the truth that makes us ever free. O Master, may thy joy fill our days. O Master, may thy wisdom guide our ways. O Master, may thy joy fill our days. O Master, may thy wisdom guide our ways.
Very beautiful. It's always such a deep joy to hear that music and those words, to feel the presence of our Guru, Paramahansa Yogananda. In the Autobiography of Yogi, Master gives us many emphases of Kriya Yoga throughout many chapters. And today I'd like to focus on the experience of Babaji first meeting Lahiri, at least in that lifetime together, and to look at these experiences, these blessings that are there, that not only to be inspired, but as Jyotishan Devi mentioned in Monday's class of Inner Renewal Week, to find what is deep in the experience. What can we take forward and actually integrate into our own experience? And so, Master shares from the sharing he received from two direct disciples of Lahiri Mahashai, Swami Kebalananda, and his own guru, Swami Sri Yukteswar, the meeting in the chapter Materializing the Palace in the Himalayas. And this happens in 1861, and at this point Lahiri is 33 years old. It's in the fall of 1861. And Lahiri is an accountant for the military engineering department of the British government. And it's good to note that he'd been in that job already 10 years. And he's summoned by his manager and told that he's transferred to this outpost, this new army post, up in the foothills of the Himalayas, Raniket. And so he takes this long 500-mile journey, and he gets there and explains that his demands on his time from work aren't that onerous, and so he's able to take free time and wander around the area. And he's heard that there are saints, yogis, up in those areas. And at one point, late in the afternoon of one day, he hears this calling, and he's drawn up to climb up higher. And he comes to a point where these caves are there, and this man, Babaji, is there. And Babaji says to him, "Do you not remember, Lahiri, your place here among the devotees and myself?" And Lahiri's just puzzled. He doesn't remember. He doesn't have any recollection of what this is all about. And Babaji points out Lahiri's blanket and other things. And again, no recognition. And then one of many blessings at this sequence of events happens where Babaji lightly touches Lahiri on the forehead. And instantaneously, Lahiri has that memory, that smriti, that divine remembrance of who he really is in this incarnation, and bows at the feet of his guru, Babaji, and is just overwhelmed by, again, the unconditional love and joy that comes from Babaji to Lahiri. And so we, looking at this, can be inspired by this story, this blessing. But if we look at this a little bit more deeply, try to enter into it and see what's behind the obvious, again, as Jyotishan Devi encouraged us in the Monday class, we see that we may not have this unique memory of being with Babaji, but what's being asked of us all the time is to deepen our remembrance of our soul nature. It's always there before each one of us to recollect who we are beyond the ego driving us with the sensual experiences. Who we are, as I said, in our true soul nature within. And so this episode allows us to feel a more expanded, more exalted experience of that memory that Lahiri goes through with Babaji. But we too should feel that we're always open, we're always able to refine who we are by diving deeper within. And then, with that meeting, Babaji explains that he's been with Lahiri all the years of this incarnation and waited for Lahiri to finally come to him. And the second blessing is, of course, as we know, that Babaji materialized a golden palace for Lahiri. And he says to Lahiri, this is to free you from any lingering karma. And likewise, as we refine our own integrative experience, we can tune into this and say, how do we refine and release all attachments, all our desires, all our likes and dislikes? There's this little footnote from Master in the Autobiography of Yogi that says, all karma has to be fulfilled in one way or another. And it isn't always going to be that we get to have a golden palace manifested for us from the divine, from Babaji or our other gurus. But we do have that metaphysical golden palace that will always be there, given to us as a blessing, that is the freedom from all karma. That as we offer ourselves, as we open ourselves to that divine presence, with deepening devotion, with expanded attunement, then we can go beyond those limitations. We can merge into that divine consciousness, into the bliss. And then, after exploring this beautiful materialized palace, Babaji brings Lahiri and says, now, my son, it is time to give you initiation into Kriya. And this is early in the morning of the day after that Lahiri first came into Babaji's presence. And the ceremony ensues, and that blessing is there. And again, this is something that maybe we overlook by just reading over this part of this chapter. But we can take it in this way. You can take it in a number of ways, but let's take it in this way. That this offering of this blessing of the Kriya ceremony is sort of like John the Baptist blessing Jesus in the river. Jesus was already a master at that point. Lahiri was already an avatar, a master at this point. But signifying to all of us, as we read this, that this sacred ceremony is a way for us to consciously and superconsciously to enter into the realm of our self-offering in Kriya. And as we open up to that experience, and as we renew our Kriya initiation periodically, whether it's once a year or however often we can do it, then we're tuning into, in essence, this tremendous blessing that Lahiri offers himself into with Babaji. That it is a blessing for each one of us that Lahiri is doing this ceremony in front of Babaji. And Lahiri is feeling these tremendous blessings. And the palace has disappeared. And in the afternoon, he says that sitting on my blanket, and for whatever reason, for me, that image is so full of a tremendous magnetism. Perhaps some of us just have those memories, those smritis of those blessings. But that image of Lahiri sitting absorbed on his asan, on his spiritual seat, on his blanket, is really an indication to all of us to really feel that when we're seated in our asan, that spiritual setting, that we are already opening to the divine experience. Perhaps, like me, you've had this happen in your life and continues to happen in your life. That when I sit in my meditation spot in my home, I can feel already there's a touch. There's already a sense of a connectedness that's deeper for me. And sometimes I just sit there in that experience before even offering a prayer, before chanting, before doing any of the techniques, before doing Kriya. Just to feel the depth of that blessing, just being in the seat, like Lahiri, sitting that afternoon on Drangiri Mountain, sitting on his blanket. And then Babaji approaches him and blesses him again. And Lahiri goes into Nirvikalpa Samadhi, the highest state, where he is released from any ego connection and is freed while liberated and free while living. And he stays in that state for 7 days. And again, interesting to note, perhaps as we tune in, we feel the blessings. Perhaps at that point, we don't come to Nirvikalpa Samadhi. But we should always endeavor, always be open that possibility of being in Nirvikalpa Samadhi is real for us in that moment. And this is, again, a refined understanding of this very brief blessing of Babaji, but that blessing extends, as I said, for 7 days. Then on the 8th day, Lahiri comes out of that state of ecstasy of Nirvikalpa Samadhi. And he finds Babaji and implores Babaji that he might stay with Babaji and his band of followers in this sacred wilderness on Drangiri Mountain. And Babaji says to him, "Though you have lived countless lives in solitary, lonely meditation, now your role is to play on the stage of life and to be a householder, helping countless others to be inspired by your life." And he says to Lahiri, "It is by purpose that the fact that you did not come to me in this lifetime until you were married. You were a householder already. You had business commitments. You had a job. Because now you will be that shining example of a balanced householder life." And Babaji says, the pleas of many, many sincere souls have not gone unanswered, but because they are challenged in the life they live, of the pressures and mundane activities that press in on them, their sincerity rings true, and their call for a divine blessing, a way to find their own spiritual heritage, is now needed. And Lahiri, you are that instrument to bring these teachings and the experience of Kriya Yoga into the lives of many householders. That your part is to be in the world but not of it, and to bring that emphasis to the many others sincerely seeking their divine home in God. And then Babaji goes on to instruct Lahiri of the transmission of Kriya to others. And he says very strongly to Lahiri that give this important transforming technique to those that have given the final sacrifice of complete renunciation. And Lahiri, on behalf of all of us, fortunately, says to Babaji, because you've lifted the restrictions of Kriya being hidden from the world, can you not find it possible to further the intense restrictions and offer Kriya Yoga to all those with deep sincerity and longing for God who haven't yet achieved their stage of final renunciation, to be allowed this opportunity, this gift, this grace of Kriya Yoga to come into their lives. And Babaji consents and gives permission. And this is really the blessing that we have before us, is this gift of Babaji really allowing all of us, when we're struggling, when we're dealing with the challenges of life, when we feel burdened by the life we're living, when we feel the slaughterhouse of things that are happening in our lives. I don't mean necessarily outwardly in any form, but just the attack on our soul nature coming from our own egocentric part of who we are, that we're able to release and let go and really find ourselves blessed in that experience. And so Lahiri takes these blessings, and at the end, Babaji says before Lahiri parts, do not have sorrow in our parting. I am always with you, and whenever you call me, I will be there for you. And then Babaji refines this a little bit as we read humorously at the end of this chapter, where he says to Lahiri, when you need me, I will always come. And that is a supreme gift to all of us, that we always can draw on the masters, on our avatars. And Kriya itself is a universal path, meaning that it's really suited for everyone because it deals with the essence of who we are. It's dealing with the energy within our astral spine. First, it's drawing the energy out in from the outer parts of that astral spine, the Irda and the Pingala, which is where our reactive process resides, where the pushes and pulls of desires and attachments, of our likes and dislikes are lodged. And so Kriya allows us to energize and magnetize the deeper part of the astral spine, the Sushumna, the central part of who we are. And as we draw that energy in, we're able to feel the freedom. And this is the way that in a sense, our spiritual anatomy is. It isn't different for one person or the other because of what they believe or the affiliation they have to a spiritual group or a church. It is the reality for all of us that we have the same spiritual anatomy. And what we're doing with Kriya is getting to the essence of it right away, to feel the exploration, and more importantly, the direct experience of who we are in that energy flow, in that prana. You know, in the chant, Desire My Great Enemy, which is one of the chants that Swami Sri Yukteswar would chant frequently, the words go, I'm going to try to say the words. Often I have a problem with the chant because I chant it only. I'm going to try to remember these words so I don't spread my voice out there. But pranayam be thy religion. Pranayam be thy salvation. Pranayam is the wishing tree. Pranayam is beloved God. Pranayam is Creator Lord. pranayama is the cosmic world. Control the little pranayama, become all-pervading pranayama. You won't have to fear anything anymore. I got through it, that's pretty good. But the idea that we're tuning into the purity of prana, that life force, and we're becoming that experience by working with this tremendously focused technique of Kriya Yoga to bring us to this experience. And as I said, this experience is universally available as we tune into the essence of our true inner anatomy in the astral spine, in the Sushumna, in the chakras. We find that we can come to that experience. We can become what we aspire to be. That is the gift, as Devi or Jyotish said on the Monday class, that Swamiji often said, quoting Master, that in this lifetime, really endeavor, not only aspire, but endeavor, take the steps, make it integrated, so that each one of us can have the experience of Nirvikalpa Samadhi and merge into divine consciousness, into that divine bliss. Blessings to you.
Thank you, Pranaba. That was really beautiful. Yogananda wrote in one article, he said, I asked a great saint, he used to hide himself when he would visit saints so that he could ask them questions. He said, I asked a great saint, is it possible to get to God? And the saint said, even to want to know God will change you. And listening to Pranaba recount the story of Babaji and Lahiri, it's just such a thrilling and creates such a great longing in all of us that is changing us and moving us toward God. So as Pranaba said, my name is Nayaswamis, Anandi, and my topic this morning is Kriya and devotion. And I'd like to start by reading something from the chapter in the Autobiography where Master receives his first samadhi from his guru. A master bestows the divine experience of cosmic consciousness when his disciple, by meditation, has strengthened his mind to a degree where the vast vistas would not overwhelm him. The experience can never be given through one's mere intellectual willingness or open-mindedness. Only adequate enlargement by yoga practice and devotional bhakti can prepare the mind to absorb the liberating shock of omnipresence. Only adequate enlargement by Kriya Yoga and devotion can prepare the mind to absorb the liberating shock of omnipresence. I find that such a beautiful passage, and especially because we often think, okay, we understand that Kriya Yoga will enlarge my consciousness, but to realize that devotion is also preparing your nervous system. It's also lifting you up to be ready for this experience of cosmic consciousness. I wanted to start this morning with a wonderful story from the Mahabharata that also explains to us how Kriya Yoga and how devotion work together. The Mahabharata, I think most of us know, is the story of our own self, our own spiritual journey. It's the great epic of India that contains the Bhagavad Gita. And in this story, every character represents part of our mind, part of our character. And most of the characters in the Gita, in the Mahabharata, are warriors. And the warriors that are trying to draw our energy into materialism, into delusion, are called the Kauravas. And the warriors that are trying to draw our energy into the spine and up to the brain for realization are the Pandavas. And there are 5 Pandava brothers, each of whom represents the 5 lowest chakras. So in this story, the Pandavas and the Kauravas are always vying for control of the kingdom, which is our body. And the Kauravas, being evil, are always trying to eliminate the Pandavas. It's the Pandavas' rightful duty to rule the kingdom, but the Kauravas are always trying to get rid of them. And so in this particular story, the Kauravas suggest to the Pandavas that they go to the city of Varanavata, where the Kauravas have built for them a special palace where they can relax and have a vacation. So as the Pandavas travel to Varanavata and they begin to tour this lovely palace, they notice a unique smell. And they're pretty bright people, and they're walking around and they realize that the entire palace is built of lac. Now I think lac is a tremendously inflammable material. I think it's probably related to the word lacquer. And also throughout this lovely palace are these huge vases entirely filled with oil. So the Pandavas realize that they have been invited to their own cremation. But fortunately, their uncle has sent a man to help them. And this man is going to dig a tunnel by which they can escape. The tunnel will start in the center of the courtyard, and it will start as a little tunnel just big enough for someone to get through, but then it will widen out so that they can walk all the way from the palace to safety at the sacred river Ganges. Now that sounds very much like an analogy for the astral spine, the sushumna, the avenue of escape from the body, which Kriya Yoga leads us into. Kriya Yoga leads us into the sushumna. And interestingly, Master called the body a melting butter doll. So we have the melting butter doll of the body and the avenue of escape through the sushumna. And when this tunnel is finally dug, the Pandavas plan that in the very darkest part of the night, the very middle of the night, they will escape. And so their mother and the four Pandava brothers go down into the tunnel. But standing still outside is Bhima. Bhima is the second oldest brother, and he represents the heart chakra. And Bhima is enormous. He's much larger than his brothers. He's extremely powerful. He's always filled with energy and vitality. And so he takes a torch, and he gleefully runs through the palace, lighting all the walls on fire, all the vats of oil on fire, and then he too ducks down the tunnel. Here, I think, is what to me is the very beautiful part of the story. The Pandavas need to move very quickly through that tunnel to get to the safety at the Ganges. But the mother and all the brothers, they're exhausted. This has just been a lot of planning to make this happen in the middle of the night, and they're all so tired they can barely walk. So Bhima, the heart chakra, devotion, love, picks up his beloved mother, puts her on his back, takes one brother on one hip, one brother on the other hip, and the other two brothers in his arms, and quickly walks to safety at the river Ganges, the holy river Ganges, the holy spiritual eye. So we have here the perfect combination. We have Kriya that has brought us into the tunnel of escape, and we have devotion and love that has powered our journey to freedom at the spiritual eye. So Master said that desire directs energy. Our desire for God directs our energy up to God, and Kriya aligns us as to how to find that location. And at the same time, purifies our devotion. Kriya rids it of any things pulling us in other directions. So the two together, Master said, Kriya without devotion is not Kriya. And I think for those of us who are disciples, we should say that devotion without Kriya is not devotion, because Kriya has been given to us by our Guru as an amazing gift for us. When I moved to Ananda in 1971, very, very early days of Ananda, it was very, very early days in myself, and I knew actually nothing about the spiritual path. I'd had transcendental meditation, and that was it. But God's grace brought me here. And so when I heard about devotion, when I watched people being devotional, I really was sort of suspicious. I really didn't know, is this sentiment? What is devotion? And my life was actually changed by the reading that I'm going to share with you that one of my friends read at Sunday service. And this reading is attributed to Adi Shankara, the first in the line of Swamis. And Master said that he thinks, Swami Kriyananda said he thinks that was Master in an earlier incarnation. So this is what he wrote. What is devotion? As a needle is drawn back to a magnet, as a creeper clings to a tree, as a virtuous wife clings to her husband, and as a river merges in the ocean, when thought thus reaches the lotus feet of the Lord and remains there for all time, that is said to be devotion. So this reading, I'd like to illustrate it with things that we find in Autobiography of a Yogi. As a needle is drawn back to a magnet. Why is a needle drawn back to a magnet? Because they're made of the same substance. The magnet is more developed, you might say, but they're made of the same substance. And in the same way, the disciple and the Guru are made of the same substance, love, and that draws them together. In the Autobiography of a Yogi, Yogananda is given a challenge by his older brother Ananda that he go to the city of Vrindavan with absolutely no money, and that he depend entirely on God to feed him during the day, to give him a tour of the city, and to give him the means to come home at night. And while in the city of Vrindavan, Yogananda and his friend are approached by a young man named Pratap. And Pratap says, I'd like to give you a tour of the city. And Master, as he's been doing so far in this test, he initially says no. And Pratap says, you can't reject me. You're my Guru. I saw you in vision. I must have this honor of touring you around the city of Vrindavan. And so they tour the city, also fulfilling part of the test. And at the end of the day, Yogananda gives Pratap a Kriya initiation. They're both young men, teenagers at that time. And decades later, when Swami Kriyananda is with Master, he says to him, have you seen Pratap since those days? And Yogananda's answer is very beautiful. He says, no, but inwardly he keeps in touch. Inwardly he keeps in touch. That's us being drawn to the magnet, to keep that connection always happening inwardly. We keep in touch. The next line of the poem, as the creeper clings to the tree. Why does the creeper cling to the tree? The creeper clings to the tree because as it climbs the tree, it's able to put its leaves out into the sun so that it can sustain itself, it can nourish itself. So the tree is responsible for the livelihood of the creeper. It couldn't survive without that tree. And that is the same for us as the disciple. That connection with the Guru can lift us in a way that nothing else can. We can't get to that uplifted state. We can't get to the sense of breaking through some of what Pranaba talked about earlier, the things that come at us in life. We can't break through to another level without that connection to the Guru. again, in the Autobiography of a Yogi, Yogananda describes his first Kriya initiation from Sri Yukteswar. Now, many people think that Kriya is the magic bullet. All I need is that technique. Once I get that technique, I'm going to find it on the internet, I'm going to sign up for this weekend workshop, and I'm going to get that technique. But this is what Yogananda writes. The technique, Kriya, I had already received from 2 disciples of Lahiri Mahashai, father and my tutor, Swami Kebalananda. But in Master's presence, I felt transforming power. At his touch, a great light broke upon my being, like the glory of countless suns, blazing together with a flood of ineffable bliss. At his touch, a great light broke upon my being, like the glory of countless suns, blazing together with a flood of ineffable bliss. So, it's not just Kriya. It's that combination of Kriya and the love for the Guru, the love for God, that empowers that Kriya technique. And I can't say that I had this experience that Master had when I had my first Kriya, and I doubt that many of us did. We were too clouded, our awakening wasn't there. But I think all of us can say that our life is radically different as a result of Kriya. And recently, I've had the blessing of helping Devalila with our Kriya preparation as part of our online with Ananda course. And yesterday, Jyotish was talking about the value of the treasures along the path. And I have to say, working for online with Ananda, this is an amazing offering, because I work on the 4th step. They've been through learning how to meditate, they've been through learning the philosophy, they've been through discipleship, and they come to this step on Kriya preparation. And how people talk about their spiritual lives is just thrilling. The level of their practice, and above all, the level of their devotion is tremendous. So anyway, I just want to mention that in case you haven't already taken those lessons. But why I brought up the subject is because of COVID, we had to start to do something that we've never wanted to do, which is to give Kriya initiation online. Kriya initiation involves teaching the technique, but it also involves a blessing from the master. And that's the core of the technique, is the blessing from the master. And so it felt like, well, how can we do this online? And this was, again, thrilling to me, because we gave a Kriya initiation in November, and 2 weeks after and in the Kriya initiation, the Kriyacharya holds up their finger and they say, I'm sending the blessing of light from the masters, holding it up in front of the camera, and the people are in their house and they're receiving it. And we thought, is this going to be the same? But Master is everywhere. He said, to those who think of me near, I will be near. So why should it make any difference? And this past year, I was calling people after they take initiation. A couple of weeks later, we phone them and we say, how's it going? And do you have any questions? And let me listen to your practice and so forth. And again, thrilling. Not only do they know the technique, but they are changed by the blessing. And one of my favorite people that I talked to was a man from the Central Valley of California, one of the big cities there. I don't remember which, Fresno or something like that, Stockton. And this man, he said, I can't believe that ceremony. He said, I'm a different person. He said, I always think of myself as a man's man. He said, I drive around my city in my truck and I'm criticizing my city and how the ugly graffiti and the ugly trash, and I'm, mentally disparaging it all. He said, since that initiation, I'm driving around going, what a lovely tree. Oh, how beautiful the sky is. He said, I feel like a girl. So that really touched me. I thought, it worked. It's being transmitted. The blessing is coming. And so that is the nourishment that comes as we cling to the Guru, cling to God in this way through devotion. The next one is, as a virtuous wife clings to her husband. How does she do that? With love and with faith. And in the Autobiography of a Yogi, there's a beautiful story of a great devotee of Lahiri Mahashaya. Her name is Abhoya. And she and her husband are planning a trip to see Lahiri, but they get caught in traffic. By the time they get to the station, the train is pulling out. And Abhoya is very upset, but she gets very, very still and quiet. And she goes in herself and she prays. And she connects with her Guru mentally. And she says, Lahiri Mahashaya, I beseech you, stop the train. I cannot bear the pangs of longing if I have to wait to see you one more day. She looks up and the train has stopped moving. The wheels are moving, but the train's not going forward. And this railway official comes up to her and says, get on the train, I'll buy your tickets for you. They get on the train, they have their tickets, and the train moves forward. Now, why did Lahiri answer that prayer? He had to. Because it was uttered with total love and total faith. She knew he would answer. He had to answer, and he did. The next one that is in here is, as a river merges into the ocean. Again, why does a river merge into the ocean? It has to. That's God's plan. It's the water cycle. It's the system of water that sustains life. And in the same way, it's God's plan that we have to merge. We have to come back to the Guru. We have to reunite with the Guru. And Master writes about meeting Sri Yukteswar, as we talked about, in that narrow lane. His Guru greets him, and he says, we entered a oneness of silence. Words seemed the rankest superfluities. Eloquence flowed in soundless chant from the heart of master to disciple. The river unites with the ocean. So I wanted to just share 3 things that we can think about in terms of bringing our Kriya and our devotion together. One is something Yogananda said. He said, practice Kriya with a sense of privilege. This is an enormous blessing that we've been given. Not only the technique, but the help of a line of masters and of our own Guru. And I was remembering that in the early days, Swami Kriyananda told us that there are paths in this world that people practice with a tremendous amount of will. And pranayama, as Pranaba was talking about, tremendous pranayama, tremendous will, but no devotion. And Swamiji said, without devotion, they are not able to access the more refined feelings of the heart. And so their energy cannot rise into the higher chakras because it's not subtle enough without devotion. Isn't that amazing? And he said because of that, they often fall from their practice. But more importantly, they can never rise. And Kriya is taught to us with so much devotion. We have the technique and we have tremendous devotion. Swami said that Kriya is like an elevator. It moves us all at once. So we aren't only just learning to bring our energy into the spine, into the brain, but we're changing as a person. And I'm sure you've seen this in yourself. You're becoming nicer. You're becoming happier, more positive. Your whole being is changing at once. So that if you have a spiritual experience, it has a strong foundation. This is an enormous privilege that we have. Secondly, when you do your practices, do them 100%. So I don't only mean, try to concentrate to the best of your ability, but especially in the Kriya technique, and perhaps I'm the only one who does this, but I don't think so. Don't second guess yourself. Don't worry about if you're doing it right. Don't judge your practice. Don't measure your practice. Obviously, if you think you need help, we have plenty of ministers here to help you check your practice, improve your practice, and so forth. But basically, just give it all you've got, and just assume that you will change and your Kriya will get better. We don't start off doing Kriya the right way because we're limited by our own spiritual awakening. So as we do Kriya, we develop spiritually, and our Kriya can go deeper. As our Kriya goes deeper, we develop spiritually. So it all works together, but you don't just go from point A to Z overnight. It's just a process, and just keep doing it, and it will work. And with that, we have to remember also what Master said, the great formula, and I think you've heard it many times, but good to remember. 25% is the disciple's effort. 25% is the effort of the Guru on our behalf, and 50% is the grace of God. When I first heard that, I thought, oh, that's great. 25%, I can do 25%. And I didn't realize it meant 100% of my effort would be 25% of the whole. But what does that even mean? Because I just want to say this. I have many friends right now who are dealing with a lot of health challenges that really limit their ability to practice. But they're giving it 100% of what they have. And I was very touched by a friend of mine who is in one of those situations, and she was talking about our traditional 8-hour meditation that we have at Ananda. And she just said, I made it through 4 hours, and I was thrilled. And I was thrilled. I was thrilled not that she made it through 4 hours, I was thrilled that she was thrilled about making it through 4 hours and not saying, oh, but I couldn't do it. That's the way to go. Give it your best, and that's all God expects. And then finally, to just know that we're never separate from God. God cannot, omnipotent as God is, there's some things he can't do. He can't criticize you, and he can't reject you. Because in addition to being omnipotent, he's also omnipresent. God is always inside of us. And so just throughout the day, in whatever you're doing, especially in your practices, feel God being close. Say, teach me Kriya. Teach me energization. Help me to do these energizations with 100% focus. Help me to hear Om. Invite him, invite his aid, and know that he's there helping you as best he can. And I want to end by reading what I read at the beginning, but I'm adding a line that I didn't include. A master bestows the divine experience of cosmic consciousness when his disciple, by meditation, has strengthened his mind to a degree where the vast vistas would not overwhelm him. The experience can never be given through one's mere intellectual willingness or open-mindedness. Only adequate enlargement by Kriya Yoga practice and devotion can prepare the mind to absorb the liberating shock of omnipresence. Cosmic consciousness comes with a natural inevitability to the sincere devotee. The intense craving begins to pull at God with an irresistible force. An irresistible force. So that, my friend, is our goal that I wish for myself, I wish it for all of us, that we pull at God with that irresistible force.
Namaste and welcome to everybody for this Inner Renewal Week that we're all joining together, spending this week to be able to go even a little bit more deeply. And as Jyotish mentioned yesterday, this week is especially directed toward those of us who have been struggling over the years, many years, decades perhaps, and yet at the same time not only struggle, gaining in deeper and deeper knowledge. And so we're able to share, perhaps on a little bit more deeper level than we might normally do doing beginning classes in public. So it's my joy to be with you today. My name is Nayaswami Jaya, and I want to thank Nayaswami Ananda, Nayaswami Pranaba for the beautiful talks that they have preceded. And I noticed that when we do talks together with old friends, people that we've been working with for many, many years, that we tend to think alike. I think we tend to converge. You might say our minds begin to converge. And yet, each of us presents on that very same topic, that perhaps even the same subjects, how we describe them, we take our own very unique journey to that same goal. This talk I'd like to address today as a subject, I think the talk is persistence. Now, when Anandi was tasked with the duty of assigning topics for this class, and she chose different ones for each one of us, and when she suggested something along the lines of persistence, I said, well, what exactly do you mean? And she says, oh, Jaya, hanging in there. In other words, we've been on this path a long time together, and yet, we're struggling. We continue to go, and that persistence and those qualities that are necessary for us to be able to continue day by day to go deeper and deeper, to call upon Master, are critical to our ultimate success. And so I'd like to share a few thoughts about that. Now, I've been practicing Kriya for many, many years. I came to Swami Kriyananda in 1968, and I read this book, which we've been talking about, and our discourses today are centered around. And reading that book in 1968 completely changed the direction of my life. I had been drifting after college, got my degree, but in that time when many of us, if you look back, those who've been in that situation after graduating, you don't know quite what to do. And not knowing what to do, I was experimenting with different things. And Shambhala Bookstore on Telegraph Avenue in Berkeley, I came across this book. And as I said, drifting one day, and all of a sudden, I had purpose in my life. And there are a couple things in the book that struck me, which I'd like to share. The first one, of course, was the power of Master. Not just the power. It was as Master said, he put his vibrations into it. It was the vibration of Master, the absolute sincerity. And I, being somewhat of an intellectual type, I tend to be a little skeptical. In my youth, I was probably much more so that way. But somehow, although the book was replete with fantastic things, my heart opened to it. I didn't necessarily understand what was being said there, but I was open to the author. I was open to Yogananda. I was open to Master, because there was such sincerity there that my heart opened. And whatever he said, I said, I don't know, but I accept the possibility of what you say. Enough that I want to find out if this is true or not. And the second thing that struck me, of course, besides Master and his greatness in that book, was the theme of Kriya Yoga. And as you read the Autobiography of a Yogi, you can't help but be curious about it. And there was one passage, a section of the book that struck me, and I want to read that. And it's in the chapter on Kriya Yoga. And Master in this chapter is describing Kriya Yoga to the person who knows perhaps a little bit about nothing about it and explaining it to them. And toward the end of that chapter, he says, with the guidance of a guru, such yogis have carefully prepared their bodies and brains to receive the power created by intensive practice. The Kriya beginner employs his yogic exercise only 14 to 28 times, twice daily. A number of yogis achieve emancipation in 6 or 12 or 24 or 48 years. A yogi who dies before achieving full realization carries with him the good karma of his past Kriya effort. In his new life, he is harmoniously propelled to his infinite goal. Now, certain part of that is what I picked up on. A number of yogis achieve emancipation in 6 years. I said, that's for me. 6 years. But thinking about it, I said, that's a long time. 6 years. I was 22. That is a long time. Can I make 6 years? I thought, well, it's going to take persistence. It's going to take perseverance. I got to be steadfast. Fortitude, those are qualities that Krishna lists in the 16th chapter of the Gita of the divine sattvic qualities of the yogi. And looking in myself, I said, well, I am persistent. Maybe I'm stubborn, but I think I can do 6 years. And so I started and began, and that became my foundation. I'm going to do this. And I brought to it those qualities that perhaps Anandi was referring to in those early years. I was one of those, but I was persistent. Now time passed, and I realized that yes, there was more than 6 years listed in that list that Master gave in that chapter. And I realized, looking back, I was a little bit naive, but those qualities are essential, and they are the foundation upon which we have to build our spiritual path. We have to have that fortitude. We have to have the persistence, the perseverance, the willingness to keep going, because the new person typically coming onto the spiritual path, it tends to be up and down, and unless a person is able to persist and persevere in that, they're going to be shallow. They're never able to break through. And of those, it's that element of commitment that it takes for a person when they come onto the spiritual path to commit. I am going to do this. Come high water or other things, I am going to do this. And when we make that commitment to the spiritual path, to our meditation, to our practices, and particularly to our guru, what happens is the doubting mind begins to give up. And they say, this man is serious. And in that, the door begins to open, and all of those hesitancies of, what if? What about this happen? Maybe I ought to do this. Maybe I should go in this way. Maybe I should go in that way. All of those begin to recede, and it opens up a flood of energy that is able to propel one. And so for those of you who are perhaps new on the spiritual path, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, what defines a new person, whatever it is for you, that needs to be there as a particular foundation. But yes, I look back now and I realize it was a little bit naive of me to approach Kriya in that way. And I did gain the wisdom that yes, although those things are absolutely necessary, they're not enough. They're just the foundation upon which something more needs to be built. Now, all of you have heard probably of Thomas Edison. He had a very famous quote. He said, people asked him about all the inventions that he came up with, and he said, well, really, it's 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. And there's a lot of truth to that, but whatever the percentages are, the point is, it's that 1% that makes the difference. It's that 1% that makes the spiritual life, from rigorous routine, the daily grind of our meditation, the just doing our technique, it makes it from that into sweet. It's what allows us to transmute our little self into the big self. It's that 1% that makes the saint. Without it, we're the sincere devotee. But if you have that last 1% or 2%, whatever it might be, that is what is going to make the difference. And of course, what is that 1%? And I think Anandi has given you the answer of that already. And I think you know that. For those of us who have been practicing long enough, we realize after strenuous effort that something more is needed. And in the last years of Swami Kriyananda's life, I had sent him an email and I'd asked him certain questions. And he wrote back to me and he says, Jaya, you have many good qualities. And he named a few. I was a little bit flattered. Oh, he recognized those qualities. He says, but you're never going to achieve success unless you learn to live more from the heart. And he says, I want to have a talk with you someday about this more deeply. And I took that to heart. Now, unfortunately, I never was able to have that talk with Swami. He didn't, he passed on. Other things intruded in that. And it's a little bit of a regret on my side. But he said that to me very straightly. He says, you're never going to find the success that you're seeking unless you learn to live from the heart. And I think he didn't mean that just for me. I think he meant that for all of us. And Swami, in his life, embodied these two elements. A man who lived from his heart, as you know, those who remember him, how his posture was so erect and he always had his heart out front. He lived from the heart, but on the other hand, he was persistent. He had that steadfastness of purpose. He was absolutely loyal. He was committed, and he had that foundation upon which that heart was able to achieve its potential because he had his feet firmly on the ground and on the path. And I believe it was about 2012 or maybe 2013. No, not quite. He died, he passed on in 2013, so it must have been 2012. He was in the city of Pune, where I was staying at that time, and he had been in the hospital. And he was released from the hospital, so immediately we put him into a very nice hotel that he liked. And we put him in there in the hotel, and he was staying there at the hotel. And I was with Nayaswamis Dhyana, and we were on our way back from Pune, and we were on our way to Delhi. And so Swamiji invited us over to say goodbye and farewell. And so we came and we were at the hotel with Swamiji in a little sitting area. And there was a few others there as well. And Swami began to reminisce about his time with Master. And we could tell very quickly that Swamiji was in an exalted frame of mind. He was not as normal, the Swamiji we usually would interact with. He was a little bit elsewhere. And he began to reminisce. He thinking about his past, and then he got to the point where he was expelled from Self-Realization Fellowship, and he said that he was hurting in his heart. And he was wondering, and what hurt him so much was, one, friends that he had thought he had in Self-Realization Fellowship. He felt some betrayal on that side. But it wasn't so much that, but it was he had this thought that came into his mind that said, I wonder if Master is displeased with me. And because he had been put out, he felt a certain disconnect, and he wasn't able to access Master's blessings as readily, easily at one certain period in his life. And he prayed to Master, and he prayed and prayed and prayed, and he said he came finally to this one point where his heart was bursting with a longing for Master. And he, and as he was saying this, Swamiji, tears were coming out of his eyes. And he said, Master, you may reject me, but I will never let you go. And he made that gesture like that. And as he was saying that, everybody was just silent. And you could see he was, in a very deep state at that point. And that touched me very, very deeply. The combination of these two elements, absolute love of the Guru, and that absolute dedication and foundation and firmness of will, loyalty, commitment, those two were combined in Swamiji, and you could see that. And you saw that whatever he did, he was marching to serve his Guru. But he did it with love. And when we act in that way, from the heart, then we find that there's no difficulty in those foundational elements that are necessary, the routine, the steadfastness. Those at first, they sound like an effort of will, and it's my willpower is in that. But when we find that we do them out of love, they're natural. Isn't it true that the lover loves the beloved? And isn't it true that when you're a lover, you will do anything for the beloved? You'll walk through hot coals to reach the beloved, and you'll demonstrate those qualities that are necessary for you to be able to achieve that which you're looking for. And so we have to have those two elements. On the first element, so we have to have that foundation. But then I like to think of it in this way. You make a platform. You might say upon which to put an altar and upon which to build a fire, a yajna, as we would say in India, to make this fire service, this fire offering, to build this fire on top of that platform. And that's what we do. We have this platform of those firmness of purpose, and we build upon it a fire of devotion, a fire of love. And when you start a fire, sometimes it's hard to get it going. And this is, I think, what happens is people that are not very good at building fires, literally, they get frustrated. But you take something like grass, a very flammable material, but it burns quickly, and then the fire goes out. And you know when you're starting to burn a fire, you have to puff on it. You puff, puff, puff in order, and finally, the fire actually gets going. And that's how it is for us in our devotion. We have to keep attentive to it and keep puffing on that. But as that fire gets going, we begin to put things into it, and it begins to sustain itself on its own. Well, here, this talk is being given from Ananda village. We know all about fires here and the potential for large fires. But an interesting thing, if we use this as an image, when the forest fires come, what happens is there's a phenomena that happens that the fire begins to generate its own wind. Just as we have to start the fire by blowing on it. And then at a certain point, the fire sustains itself. But when that fire gets really big in the forest, it begins to generate its own wind, and it begins to suck in air from all around. And so it's actually quite dangerous to be in that zone where the air is being pulled in. And you can actually, people have been known to be suffocated in that situation. Well, it's the same thing with our devotional efforts. We get to the point where that devotion becomes strong enough, Swami is an example, that it begins to generate its own wind to carry us, and everything else begins to be sucked into that fire. All of the, you might say, obstacles of our life, that karma that we're trying to burn through our practice of Kriya Yoga. Remember how Master says, if we practice Kriya, the fire of that movement of current of prana up and down the spine, you could say, incinerates that old karma. Well, a bonfire begins to incinerate it rapidly. And this is what happens when we begin to practice our Kriya in a very deeply with the power of that fire of love. So that combination, love built upon the foundation of absolute commitment. I will never let you go. I will practice Kriya Yoga faithfully and regularly as it is taught to me. And we do that with devotion, and that fire is ignited, and it begins to draw in and burn that karma that resides within us. Now, yesterday, Jyotishji gave us all an assignment. Remember? He said, take a spark or some inspirational spark out of the Autobiography of a Yogi and expound upon it, each of us individually. What did it mean for us? Think about that meaning and share that with one another. And I'd like to do that as well, because I've explained two elements here. The foundation, I've also in that devotional attitude. But there's also an element for all of us as Kriyabans. How do we take that Kriya and how do we express it outwardly in our day-to-day life? And how do we make practical use of that Kriya? And I'd like to share a few thoughts about this. This second chapter, this is from an experience in cosmic consciousness. Well, obviously, when I first read the Autobiography of a Yogi, this chapter stood out for me. It can't help. You read this and you go, oh my God. And of course, that's what I want. You could say this was a motivating chapter, but I read this little part at the end later. I went right over it first. It didn't strike me. But as time went by, I began to realize this, which you might say one of the motivating elements of the autobiography that has guided me throughout all these decades now, that I've been practicing Kriya and that I've been practicing the spiritual path, trying to take Kriya and apply it into daily life. And it's it toward the end. Many people just go right over it. And Swami Sri Yukteswar is saying, he is near and dear. After the mind has been cleared by Kriya Yoga of sensory obstacles, meditation furnishes a twofold proof of God. Ever new joy is evidence of His existence, convincing to our very atoms. Also in meditation one finds His instant guidance, His adequate response to every difficulty. Then Master replies, I see, Guruji, you have solved my problem. I smiled gratefully. I do realize now that I have found God, for whenever the joy of meditation has returned subconsciously during my active hours, I have been subtly directed to adopt the right course in everything, even details. Now, what is he saying here? He said, when we act in the joy, real joy, not just being happy, but in God's joy that we have cultivated in meditation, in our practice of Kriya, when we act in that joy, we will be subtly guided to the right course in everything, even in the details. And this is the answer to so many questions that people continually ask. What should I do in life? Should I do this? Should I do this? Should I take this course of action or that? The joy of meditation, God is joy. God as joy is the fruit of Kriya itself. Master was an expression of that joy. When that joy is awakened within us, in action, we're going to be guided rightly. Even if we still wonder, is this the right thing? Go where that joy is. This was what Swami used to tell us. Go to the joy, where you feel that joy. And you'll find that that's true. Now, the temptation may be here, well, I don't feel that joy. I'm going to wait for it to come. Like Swami giving that lecture and waiting for God to speak through him. It's not like that. We have to consciously, until it becomes natural, and we'll just find that it automatically is being there, but until that point, we have to prime the pump and we have to summon that joy consciously. We can choose joy in every moment of our life and make this the act of your Kriya Yoga in action. Taking the fruit of what Kriya is meant to give us and putting it into action. And I think we'll find that everything, because we're in joy, we're in attunement with God's will. And we'll find that as we do that, things work out. And I love that little phrase, even in the details. Now, years have passed, and all of us here today, many of us are new, but many of us also have been doing this for a long time. And I don't know if you're like me, but I feel a sense of urgency. Time has passed. And yes, just as Anandi mentioned, that one person having difficulty with the body, I have difficulty with the body too. I can't meditate as long as I used to without feeling pain in the body. The 8-hour meditation is, you might say, a challenge. And what's the answer to that? I have to dive deep quickly. I can't wait. I got to go deep fast, or else the body pulls me out. It pulls us out. And I think this is one thing I've learned, is that don't wait. When you meditate, when you practice, go deep. And then you could sort of say you hide from the body, if you can learn to do that. And then you can continue to meditate. But I used to like to just sit there and kind of be in that semi-subconscious peaceful state, I guess is the way I would describe it now, and just drift along because it was so comfortable. And that's a bit of a waste of time. It was enjoyable, but it was a waste of time. We have to go deep right away. The body begins to abandon us. But yet, in that, if we learn to go deep, we can fool it a little bit, go beyond the body. The other thing is, as we realize too that God is the doer, but we can do it with God. It doesn't have to be either or. It's either God or me. Why don't we do it together? And I think as we've gone on, I've found that practicing, daily life, but particularly also practicing Kriya, do your Kriyas with God. Do your Kriyas with Guru. And you'll find that it becomes sweet. Do it with love. And my spiritual path, the expression of the spiritual path, has been the combination of these three elements that I've tried to share with you today. One, that foundation, persistence, steadfastness, it's always got to be there. That's, you might say, an expression of willpower. to be able to maintain that. Secondly, make it sweet. Love brings that sweetness. And I think of Swami in that way. Swami, this is what he would want for us. And thirdly, I bring that element of what Master was, a representation. He was a representation of joy. Bring joy and act in joy. Meditate in joy. Offer your kriyas up into joy and self-sacrifice into that fire that we build there in front of us. And I see the spiritual life now, looking back, as it's a bit of a long-distance race, maybe. And as a youth, I was in high school a long-distance runner. And when we would run those races, you'd set a pace, but then where we ran our races, we'd come around a turn, and there was a big green field, 200-300 yards long, and the finish line was at the end of that green field, plain field. And we'd come around and hit that field, and we'd sprint that last bit. We'd sprint fast as everything you had. We'd go and to hit that finish line and cross it. I think that's how the spiritual path is too. And for those of us who are walking this path, let's sprint. And let's be like that crowd that's on, as you start to come to the finish line, there's the crowd on both sides waiting for you to cross that line. They're cheering. And as each of us head to that finish line, our gurubhais, let's cheer for one another. Let's support one another. And let's give it everything we have. Because that sense of urgency is calling us. It's God calling us at that finish line. And the Master promised they would be there to welcome us over that line and usher us in to the world, whatever that might be, beyond this physical body, beyond this earthly existence. So take these and apply them as you can in your daily meditation, in your daily practice of Kriya Yoga. Much joy to you. Now, I'd like us to end today by sending out blessings. Sending out blessings to everybody, sharing them with others, and also one particular person I'd like us to share blessings to is Mary Franklin passed yesterday. Great, nice devotee, beautiful devotee, many years I serving with her, and she passed yesterday. And so let's particularly send blessings to her soul that she has crossed that finish line and is in the arms of the Masters right now. So let's pray together. Divine Mother, great Masters, saints and sages of all religion, may thy love shine forever on the sanctuary of our devotion. And may we be able to awaken thy love in all souls. And may we be able to share thy blessings, thy light, that fire of devotion, of love with all, that it light a flame of devotion to carry us all into thy light, into thy divine fire of bliss. Rub our hands together and let's send these blessings out. Om, Om, Om. God bless you.